It is 2015. Halo 6 is announced quickly after the release of Halo 5. Not long after this announcement, 343 announced a new graphics engine for Halo known as Slipspace. In 2017, at a DICE presentation, 343 announces that Halo 6 will feature split-screen co-op. Fans are elated since Halo 5 did not have split-screen. Later that year, 343 promises Halo 6 will focus more on Master Chief, seeing as how he was barely in Halo 5. In 2018, Microsoft releases the first teaser for Halo Infinite, revealing the name change. No gameplay is shown. Later that year, 343 says fans who enjoyed armor customization in Halo Reach will love Halo Infinite. The speculation abounds. At E3 2019, another trailer is shown. 343 states that internally, the game is viewed as a, quote, spiritual reboot. Further speculation abounds. 343 further elaborates, stating the game will be an open-world experience. August 2019, 343 creative director Tim Longo leaves the company. Microsoft announces that producer Mary Olson had already taken over as Halo Infinite's creative director, replacing Tim. The game is tremendously behind schedule. 343 decides to scrap 2/3 of the planned game. The world map is made much smaller. October 2019, Mary Olson leaves 343. Skipping all the way to July 2020, the infamous Halo Infinite gameplay trailer drops, revealing the open-world nature of the game and graphics that were decidedly less than impressive. At the time, the game was scheduled to release in 4 months. 343 attempts to damage control in a blog post. It does not calm the nerves of longtime Halo fans. August 2020, Microsoft announces Halo has been delayed, blaming the pandemic. A new release window is not given. The same month, Phil Spencer states in an interview that the company had considered releasing Halo Infinite in multiple parts instead of delaying the entire game. This causes rampant speculation about the nature of the game's design. Shortly thereafter, a report from Thoreau reveals behind-the-scenes details concerning the development, including loss of multiple directors, outsourcing around 50% of the team's overall staff. Microsoft only kept contractors for 18 months, so 343's staff was a constantly revolving door, issues that arose from the development of the Slipstream engine, and so on. An anonymous inside source describes development up to that point as, it was like 4 or 5 games being developed at once. Joseph Staten, lead writer for the first 3 games, is brought in as a new creative director and to right the ship. October of 2020, 343 releases a small update about the armor customization system for Halo Infinite, revealing a Destiny-like shading system. Rumors fly that Halo will be riddled with microtransactions. In that same month, another creative director, Chris Lee, leaves the project to assume other duties at Microsoft. December 2020, 343 announces the game will release in the fall of 2021. November 2021, in a surprise move, Microsoft releases the multiplayer component for free, totally separate from the core game. It has only 3 maps, no forge, and various other missing components. Most fans don't seem to care. December 2021, Halo Infinite releases to near unanimous critical acclaim. There is no split-screen co-op, or co-op at all. Shortly thereafter, cat ears are shown as an armor mod for the multiplayer, along with numerous other available microtransactions for the armor, guns, and so on. Good God. What a shit show! Alright, so first off, cool your jets. I won't be reviewing the multiplayer. This is all about the core game. I just had to explain the history to you so you would understand the horrors that await. The multiplayer plays fine for what it is. It's the Halo multiplayer you've loved for generations, only now you can swing around the map like Spider-Man. It only has 3 maps for you to swing around like Spider-Man in. There's no forge, few play modes, and it quickly becomes flooded with ridiculously expensive and stupid-looking microtransactions, but yeah, it plays just fine, so no worries. It's the campaign that really grinds my gears. Playing it from start to finish, you can just see the plot hole-laden roadmap this game took from start to finish. It's right there for all the world to see, and the fact that most major gaming journalists didn't point out any of it at all tells you all you need to know about the state of modern gaming journalism. And Xbox fanboys, for that matter.
Dumber than a second coat of paint.
Right off the bat, let's talk graphics. Yes, the enemy characters look better than they did in the infamous gameplay reveal, but not by much. They added a few wrinkles and gave them facial hair. Ooh-ah. The models themselves, even during in-engine cutscenes, still look like last-generation models, which is what we've seen in most next-gen releases so far on both these systems. When a game starts development years before the hardware it's being made for even exists, or in this case began its development as a game for the previous hardware, you're going to end up with first-year games that look just marginally better than what you've had before, but it may be higher resolutions and better frame rates, so it's not that big a deal really. Where the game really lets me down graphically is in the overall look of the world map. Everything pretty much looks the same from area to area. Unlike other open world games where there's large, standout visual markers that give you a good indication of where you're at and the direction you need to go, Infinite's map just looks like the same thing from section to section. When I first stepped out onto the open world map, much like Dark Alliance, I thought it was procedurally generated. That's how generic it is. There's no snowy areas, no desert. It's all the same climate, all the same assets reused over and over again. And hey, look, fanboys, the trees don't move when you touch them. In fact, you walk right through them. Last gen confirmed, right? The game maintains a mostly stable 60 frames per second on Xbox Series X, but with some caveats. The map, the enemies, all of that is 60 frames, no problem, but parts of Master Chief aren't. When you reload your weapon, the weapon and your arm are 30 frames per second. When you shoot your grapple hook, your arm and the cable are 30 frames per second. I have no idea why, but that's the way it is. The in-engine cutscenes are another matter entirely. On Series X, the skip and stutter all over the place. 343 acknowledged this, said a fix was coming, but I went back to the game just yesterday to make sure I had all the footage I needed, and it's still going on. Overall, it's not horrible to look at by any means, but it doesn't graphically stand above any other new AAA game released so far this gen. The music is fine, it sounds like Halo. What's inconsistent is how much of it there is, and how often it decides to play. I got into numerous skirmishes where there should be big, bombastic Halo music playing, but there was no music at all. Just me, the sound of gunfire, and the unfunny screams of grunts and elites. The voice acting is fine, though some of the dialogue and when it chooses to trigger, especially when it comes to the weapon, leaves a lot to be desired, but we'll get into that later. Let's talk gameplay! Anyone who's played past Halo games, especially the previous two, can sit down and acclimate to this game almost immediately. But at the same time, it's also easy to see the development hell this game went through, as it appears that Halo Infinite is made up of cobbled together pieces of the various iterations of it that existed as creative directors came and went faster than your average Hollywood marriage. The game starts out with 3 traditional linear Halo maps, ending in a boss fight with a hammer-wielding space gorilla, and then whoosh, you're on one of the smallest open-world maps you've seen since the PS3. Immediately, you notice that the gunplay is exactly like you've always known it, only now you can grapple around the map, grapple your opponents for quick elbow kills, and so on. You'll run around destroying enemy camps, enemy bases, taking out particular mini-boss targets, all marked on your map as you progress like a typical Far Cry/Ubisoft open world game. But then you start to get a feeling that something is just off. When you take over your first station point where you can spawn a new vehicle, you notice that there's 4 different weapon stations there, not just one. But the NPCs don't seem to use them. They just stand around until you get to the point where you can spawn vehicles big enough for them to sit on, and then they join you. Later, you'll come to an enemy base with multiple vehicles parked nearby, as though just waiting for multiple Spartans to come along and grab them. And then again, towards the end of the game, you'll happen across a map where you're flooded with enemies on all sides in waves, and sitting there off to the side is a warthog, which is of no help at all since you're by yourself and can only either drive it or fire its cannon, but not both. It's almost as if this whole thing was built to be a co-op Destiny-like games as a service experience, isn't it? The plot thickens. Then you start to notice whole other issues that would arise from a studio that has little to no experience making an open world game, suddenly deciding to make an open world game because Breath of the Wild was cool. Side note, idiots who think Breath of the Wild is the first successful open world game are a topic for another time. Remember now, it started development in 2015, but wasn't announced as open world until 2019. The vehicles get easily stuck on rocks, trees, and so on, almost as though proper vehicle traversal wasn't taken into account when making the map. The map is full of choke points where you're meant to kill all the enemies before you can lower a bridge, but thanks to the grappler, you can just grab a flying vehicle, skip the combat altogether, and fly over the gap without ever lowering the bridge. Or you can use the grappler to, say, scale over a gate blocking your way instead of unlocking the gate after killing all the required enemy swarm. Compared to other open world games, the progression system is a joke. There is no leveling system, everything is about item collection. You can acquire pieces of tech from completing the first several story missions, a better grappler, a better shield, a shield wall, a beacon that reveals invisible enemies, and so on. All of them can be upgraded by finding Spartan points on the map. You can also defeat mini-bosses that add to the roster of weapons available for those aforementioned loadout stations, and you can unlock additional vehicle types that you can spawn. It all boils down to item collection. There's a couple of what you could call side quest types littered across the map. Find ancient relic sites, rescue some soldiers being held hostage, destroy propaganda towers, but none of that really lends to your character progression. They're mostly just linked to find all of these style achievements, providing you mainly with additional recordings detailing the plot you don't actually get to see or pieces of lore. And it goes without saying that all of it is incredibly repetitive. All the bases are the same, the whole map looks the same, and most of the story beats take place in classic indoor linear Halo maps of bases that all look the same from one to the next until you get to the final section of the final mission of the game. The reuse of assets is strong with this one. Some of this superfluous side stuff can lead to unlocking additional upgrade points for your gear, of which only the grappler is really useful and worth upgrading. Playing on normal difficulty, you never need the shield wall, never need the beacon, and because of the fact that there are enemies in the game that have melee attacks that can one-hit kill you, regardless of how much you've upgraded your shield, shield upgrades are only marginally useful since it only really assists with weapon fire, and even with a max shield, towards the end of the game there are enemies with weapon fire that can obliterate your shield in one shot as well. I first came to this realization at about the 5-hour mark, at which point I'd spent most of my time killing mini-bosses, rescuing hostages, destroying towers, and looking for Spartan upgrades, you know, playing it like an open-world game, only to come up against yet another hammer-wielding space gorilla boss in a narrow-ass hallway who could one-hit kill me right through my upgraded shield with a single lunge. But thanks to my upgraded grappler, I could zip away from him, pull off a couple of shots, zip away again, pull off a couple more shots till he was dead. Almost all that time I'd spent trying to play this open world game like an actual open world game was completely wasted. So then, from that point on, I gave up on all that mess and just started zipping from story point to story point and beat the game in about an additional 3 hours. Yes, you heard me right. When you take away all the time I blew doing side mission stuff that amounted to nothing, I was able to complete this quote-unquote massive open-world game on normal difficulty in roughly 5 hours of game time. And it was also during this time that I discovered the enemy AI really hadn't improved since 2015, as enemies are all essentially trained to run directly at you once you've crossed a given trigger point. I then accidentally discovered that in just about every story-driven encounter where the game didn't force you to clear a room before a door would unlock, you could simply grapple past scores of enemies and get to the door leading to the next area, making missions that were meant to be hour-long affairs taking mere minutes instead. And really, what's the point of shooting another wave of the same grunts, jackals, elites, and space gorillas that you've been killing for 20 years if A, the door to the next area is hanging wide open, and B, there's no experience system so you get nothing from killing these enemies? This is then padded out by seemingly endless go grab multiple batteries to unlock this door puzzles that are just there to extend this otherwise embarrassingly short gameplay experience. And prior to me figuring this out, I noticed that for these big enemy bases you think you have to actually take over, you can just load up a warthog full of NPCs armed with sniper rifles and drive through them, insta-killing most of the enemies on screen. On Legendary and any other difficulty, as long as your vehicle doesn't get stuck on an object, that is. In short, even on Legendary difficulty, thanks to its poorly thought out and broken mechanics, one of the best strategies to beating entire sections of Halo Infinite is to not play it at all, or at least not as it was apparently intended. Now lastly, let's talk story. Warning, warning, a spoiler warning is in effect. A spoiler warning is in effect. It's still in effect. A spoiler warning is still going on. Spoiler warning. There be spoilers ahead. Halo 5 ended with Locke rescuing Master Chief in the nick of time before Cortana warped away to go take over the galaxy, setting you up for a world-hopping adventure in Halo 6 where you'd face off against the Master Cortana program for the fate of all biological life. Halo Infinite, however, begins with all of that having happened already and getting your ass handed to you by Atriox, an ex-Covenant space gorilla warlord who leads a group of ex-Covenant members and criminals called the Banished. This explains why you're still fighting the same 4 or 5 enemy types you've been fighting for 20 years. Cortana destroyed the space gorilla homeworld, and Atriox is pretty pissed about it. You get chucked out of an airlock, only to be rescued by the most annoying character in the game, a guy pretending to be a space marine pilot but really just stole the ship, and you find yourself orbiting a partially destroyed Halo ring. Apparently, Atriox and Cortana got into it down on that ring, and realizing the errors of her ways, Cortana took Atriox out by blowing up a huge chunk of the ring, just as Atriox used the weapon to kill Cortana. And all of that, which is way more interesting than the plot you actually get to take part in, happened off-screen. You discover the absolutely massive dearth of plot you weren't allowed to watch or play via various flashbacks, extensive exposition plot dumps, and audio logs. You don't even get to fight Atriox, the Spartacus of space gorillas who chucked you out the airlock. The fake pilot wants to just head back to safe space, but Chief demands to go to the ring to search for survivors and find out what happened. He quickly finds out that Locke and all of the old Blue Team cohorts are dead, Cortana is dead, pretty much everybody except for Chief, the pilot, and some nameless NPC soldiers are all dead. But then, you also find out what the weapon was. The weapon is an AI clone of Cortana, designed specifically to shut her down once she succumbed to AI dementia. Yes, that's a thing in this series. It occurs every 7 years ago. Weapon was meant to be deleted once Cortana was dead, but this did not occur. Chief loads her into his helmet, and you are then forced to listen to Weapon throughout the rest of the game. Only this isn't the Cortana you remember. Instead, Weapon comes across as Cortana after being fed an AI mod based on the Leona Huxley character from Demolition Man.
You really licked his ass.
Now that I've said that, go back and replay some of the game. You'll never be able to unhear it. In the wake of Atriox's apparent death, we are left with one of his subordinates, a space gorilla war chief named Eskaram, whose entire character is ripped right from the Next Generation era Klingons, but replacing Kahless with Atriox, and damn, Eskaram loves him some Atriox. He talks about him non-stop throughout the game, in a tone that comes across more like pining over a lost lover or an out-of-league crush than an actual leader. It's especially noticeable and weird during some of the audio logs you find, but it also takes place during some of his cutscenes that all take place in a dimly lit control room with the same camera angles, reminding one more of scenes from the movie version of Wing Commander than old school Halo. It's embarrassingly bad. The rest of the plot, such as it is just you making your way across what's left of this particular ring, defeating Eskaram's various henchmen, who are all either space gorillas with hammers, space gorillas with jetpacks and guns, jet gorillas with jetpacks, guns, and hammers, elites who can turn invisible, and so on. On 2 occasions, you'll fight AIs that look like robotic eyes of the beholder, and at the end, you'll fight the Harbinger, an alien Eskaram's been working with this whole time, who escaped from a digital prison called a Forerunner Silex when Zeta Halo went kablooey. This species is as old as the Forerunners, but looked and act more or less like the Promethean AI Warden Eternal boss you had to fight over and over in Halo 5. You kill Eskaram, then you kill the Harbinger. Then you find out that Atriox, who has been mentioned ad nauseum throughout the game, is alive!
That's shocking.
And then the weapon wants to stick with Chief and asks to be called Cortana. The end! In short, this game's plot more or less retcons the events of Halo 4 and 5, along with a few points from Halo 1, 2, 3, and Reach, and reboots the entire series back to square one, folks. You're Chief, you just defeated an alien race on an ancient Halo ring, and you have an AI named Cortana as your new bestest friend. Heard that one before? Halo Infinite is a broken mishmash comprised of chunks of a traditional linear Halo 6 and a Far Cry-style open-world action RPG shooter, sprinkled with elements of a games-as-a-service style piece of shit, but without enough of those disparate game types to succeed at any one of them. It was obviously meant to be played co-op, and maybe by the time co-op finally shows up in May, some of these other broken aspects of this Frankenstein monster will get fixed as well. But until that happens, Halo Infinite Disappointment gets a 4 out of 7.